Alrighty, welcome back, S'mores, to another episode of Beyond the Campfire. I am one of your hosts, Steven, alongside my partner here, Will. We are the cowboy and Indian, talking about uh, anything that goes bump in the night, ghost stories, conspiracy theories, all of that. So, if you like that kind of content, if you're new to our podcast, be sure to give us a follow. But yeah, today we got a kind of a ghost story for you guys
Mhm.
today. So, we have last couple of weeks we've been talking about aliens and all kinds of things like that. But yeah, we're circling back around and we are coming back to ghost stories. So, Will, what do you have for us today?
Well, the cool thing about this episode today, guys, is we actually are probably going to cover this topic twice. Today, we're covering the haunting side of things. The next time we cover it, I'm not going to promise it'll be next week. It probably won't be for a couple months, but eventually we will recover this topic and we will cover the more mystery side of things because this haunting occurs because of this certain mystery, and that is the Lizzie Borden house. If you don't know, there's the rhyme about the place. I've got the nursery rhyme right here. Have you ever heard the nursery rhyme, Stephen?
I have actually, yeah. I don't
Mm-hmm.
remember it off the top of my head, but let me look it up really quickly because
Yep, because I have it. I wrote it down.
oh, you did? Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's a little bit inaccurate, but it's a fun little rhyme. Did you want to say it?
Yeah, Lizzie Borden took an axe. She gave her mother 40 whacks. When she saw what she had done, she gave her father 41.
How's that for a nursery rhyme?
I
So
know, right? You know what? I'm gonna saying that to my kid.
there you go. Who's coming very very soon?
Yeah, well, actually, by the
Well,
time this episode is released, he's actually already here.
yeah, that's true. Actually, yeah, yeah. So
Yeah, for those of you who don't know, we are filming in advance because right now it's January 10th. He's due January 20th. The wife is at 38 weeks, fixing to be 39 weeks. So, as you guys know, he's technically done cooking. He can come at any point. So, just be prepared. Here we
what?
are.
When will this episode release? Like what? This one? I think this one's January 31st. I think.
I believe, yeah, 31st.
Okay, gotcha. So
Yep. So, um, yeah. So he'll
yeah.
be here. But anyways, so about the Lizzie Borden house, obviously, as many of you guys know, you've heard the mystery of Lizzie Borden killing her father and then her stepmother. That is not what we're talking about today. We're not. I mean, we will probably mention the murders a little bit, but as for that, that is a whole nother episode because that is a conspiracy, that is a mystery, that is an unsolved crime, kind of like the Black Dahlia case. Whether or not you believe Lizzie Borden actually did it or not, who knows? There are probably a list of suspects. We're not going to go into those. Today, though, we are just talking about the home and its hauntings, which, of course, its hauntings happen to coincide with what happened with the murders because for those of you who kind of know about ghosts and the way they act, usually ghosts will haunt a location that had a tragic accident or a tragic incident. That's the reason why Lizzie Borden's house is haunted. So, without further ado, the Lizzie Borden house. So, this house is located in Falls River, Massachusetts. It was built in 1845 as a two-family home. Andrew Borden, Lizzie Borden's dad, happened to buy he bought the house in 1872 and he kind of remodeled it so that it'd be a one family home instead of two. And then he moved in there with his wife and his two daughters. His oldest is Emma and his youngest is Lizzie. Now, I'm going to go through a little bit of the timeline of the murder. I'm not going to go too much into the trial, but I will just kind of talk about what happened there because it kind of gives you a little bit of background to understand probably what could be haunting the place. So on August 4th, 1892, there was murder afoot. At around 9 o'clock, Andrew Borden, that was 9 o'clock in the morning, Andrew Borden, who's Lizzie's father, he returns home from his morning errands and he's dead in the living room after being brutally attacked with a hatchet like weapon. At around 9:15 a.m., Abby Borden, Lizzie's stepmother, is also attacked and murdered in the guest bedroom of the house, most likely at the same time as Andrew. She is found with similar injuries to those of Andrew, leading investigators to suspect both deaths were committed by the same person. So that's basically all I'm gonna really go into is just 9 o'clock. Andrew was found murdered. 9:15. Abby was found murdered. Now, whether or not you actually believe that Lizzie Borden did it, that's another episode. But one last key detail I'll say about Lizzie, because Lizzie was acquitted for the trial. And then she eventually moved somewhere else. She lived there till she was about 1921, I believe it was. And then she died. So that's basically all we have. And now Lizzie is said to actually have haunted this location as well, the home she resided in after the trials, or after the trial of the murder. So that's the history of the home. I will get into the further history, but first I'm going to kind of lay out for you guys so you can kind of get in your head where these murders happened. So as soon as you walk in the front door, so one thing about the home that I will say is the house actually has no hallways. There's no hallways in the home. It's all just one room to the next, to the next, to the next. So as soon as you walk in the front door, kind of picture in your head, you walk in the main entryway, and to your left is a door that leads to a parlor. And if you walk straight back from the main entryway, past the staircase, and through another door, you end up in the sitting room. So you walk through, and then if you're in the sitting room, to your left, there's two doors, and in between those two doors is a couch. That couch is where Andrew was found dead. Um, if you go up the stairs lead up to the only kind of hallway, which is a landing. So the stairs, they go up, and when they go up, they take a left, or not left, my bad. Yeah, left. So when you walk in the main entryway to talk about where Abby was murdered, when you walk in the entryway, there's a staircase to your right. You take the staircase up, and then it turns to the left, and then you're on the landing. Now, there's a door, which would be straight ahead from the staircase, which would be left technically of the entryway downstairs, is the guest bedroom. It's the room above the parlor. That is where Abby was found murdered. So that's kind of all I'm really going to give more details about the house. Lizzie's room is actually across. So when you came up that landing, and I told you if you're looking straight the door that leads to the guest room, Lizzie's room is actually above the sitting room. And that's kind of the only details I'll kind of give. Now, of course, I couldn't really figure out from the blueprints. There is another stairway in the back of the house, which actually leads up to the attic, where there's an unfinished bedroom in Bridget's room. Bridget is the servant of the home, the maid, if you want. And she lived up in the attic. Now, the reason why I mentioned the attic is because the attic is also another well-known haunted place in the home. Actually, it is the most haunted location. I don't understand why Bridget's attic room is the most haunted. It is. So eventually the home was
Yeah,
up.
maybe she's the true murderer.
Maybe.
I don't know.
Wouldn't that be something? So a little bit of the further history. So after kind of Lizzie Borden and her family lived there, after the murders, it kind of bounced from owner to owner. Eventually in 1996, it was opened as a bed and breakfast. And the owner of the house inherited it, I believe, from their grandmother. And they kept the house historically accurate. Like, they went through and bought furniture and decorated the home and did all of this to make it look like it did at the time of the murders. And then, of course, they opened it up as a bed and breakfast. So you could, stay in a murder house, because that's what Americans love to do, especially white women.
I feel like we in the U.S. have a lot more serial killers than a lot of other countries. And I mean, that's a problem in and of itself. But not
Yeah.
only have serial killers, but the amount of people that like start to simp and like obsess over these serial killers is kind of concerning.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, you think about
The Bundys and the Jeffrey Dahmers and all that. So,
well, it's kind of funny because it's like mostly it's women. Okay. We're probably going to get canceled by the women, but it's the women. They like to listen to their little murder podcast. And I'm just sitting there like, yeah, you're simping over Ted Bundy, but Ted Bundy would make you a victim. Like, why do you want to sympathize with this guy?
all the true crime girlies that listen to our podcast are now canceling us right now. But
Tweet
hey,
it out.
it's not
Tweet it
our.
out.
You guys, you're
Yeah.
the ones that are simping over Ted Bundy of all people. So
I know, like John Wayne Gacy, like clowns freak me out, man. What are you talking about? You
Right.
know, It's like people like all these people are like, oh, I like they write fan fictions and all this, and it's like you realize that you would be a victim. I mean, probably not with like,
100%.
I mean,
Mhm.
Jeffrey Dahmer wouldn't kill the women, nor would
Right.
John Wayne Gacy because they liked boys and men. So they're
Ted
not
Bundy would though.
Ted Bundy. Yeah, he'd take you in his little punch Volkswagen Beetle,
Hmm.
and he'd like, oh, he punch buggy, no punch back, like stab buggy.
I know, crazy stuff.
Yeah.
I hate that he was a law student because now he makes all law students like me look kind of bad. But anyway, that's a story for another.
Yeah. Anyways, so yeah, so the Lizzie Borden murders happened, bounced from owner to owner, 1996. These two guys acquire it from their grandmother, and they make it a bed and breakfast. Now the cool thing is, in 2021, the home actually sold for $2 million to Lance. I'm probably going to butcher Lance's last name. It's Zaal. So I'm going to say Zal. Zal. He's the guy that owns this touring, like kind of ghost touring company called Ghost Adventure, not the TV show. And he right now currently runs it as an Airbnb, um, or not Airbnb, like bed and breakfast type thing. He also has normal, regular historical like tours, not the haunting stuff. You can also go there and investigate the place if you want to. Um, he has like murder mystery themed nights. He has all kinds of cool little things he does there now that are not just bed and breakfast and ghost stuff. It's a lot more, though. Definitely feels like it's definitely centered more around the murders. Apparently, they claim that they actually have the murder weapon there, or at least a replica. So, yeah, a fun little place that Steven and I are definitely putting on our little bucket list of places to go visit. So, I'm going to get into a list of the haunts. And then after I get into the list of the haunts, I actually decided to try something, and it worked out pretty decent. And the idea I actually had is to have a chat GBT story written about this. Did I lose the chat GBT? No, I did not. I know where it's at.
Did you? Oh, so you made one for this episode?
Mhm. Yeah, I made one for this episode of me and you actually investigating the Lizzie Borden house. Now it's kind of boring because when we actually visit this place, I'm gonna let you guys know when Steven and I, because this is on my bucket list of places to visit. It will not be as quick as the story. It will not be a me and Steven walk in there, get our poop our pants and run out as we did in the story. Although it's really interesting with the ChatGPT story because we've created our own little MCU universe of Steven
Right.
and I with these cryptids because they're actually starting to interchange and interlock into each other.
Well, I was gonna say ChatGPT remembers like the previous story, so each story kind of feeds off
Yeah.
previous, right? Yeah, I love that. It's not the MCU, it's not the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but it's the
Beyond the Campfire cinematic universe.
there you go, the BTCCU. Okay, well, we might have to work on that, but
BTCFCU.
yeah,
Find out what it means to me.
you know what we're talking about. So we got our own little universe going on. I love it.
All right. So inside the home, as we've stated, there's been this murder. And then, of course, I talked about the owners have bounced around, but most of the hauntings pertain more towards Lizzie Borden. Not any of the other owners, but Lizzie Borden. Okay. So there have been reports of apparitions of Andrew and Abby Borden. Andrew Borden's spirit. Some visitors and paranormal investigators claim to have seen the ghost of Andrew Borden, particularly in the area where his body was found. Go figure. People have also reported a feeling of a cold presence, hearing unexplained footsteps, or seeing fleeting images of a man in period clothing. Pretty spooky. Abby's spirit, she was murdered upstairs. She said to haunt the house. Her apparition has been reported in the guest room where she was killed. Guests have mentioned hearing soft, unexplained voices or unexplained footsteps or feeling as though they are being watched, particularly in the upstairs bedrooms. What's actually really cool, and this is just a little quick fact, because as I stated, the house is period accurate and they did make it a bed and breakfast. The most requested room is actually Abby's room, or at least the guest room where Abby was murdered. Kind of makes you wonder. There's also been strange noises and unexplained sounds. One of the most occurrences One of the most common occurrences in the Lizzie Borden house is the sound of footsteps. Obviously, from what we heard about Andrew and Abby, footsteps are just kind of the thing. Guests and staff have often reported hearing the distinct sound of footsteps walking around, especially in the upstairs rooms, even when the house is otherwise empty. There are accounts of disembodied voices or whispers coming from areas of the house where no one is present. These voices are sometimes described as faint, as though they are coming from a different time period. There are banging and scratching sounds. Guests have reported hearing the sounds of heavy banging, scratching, or tapping noises at night, particularly in the attic, where Lizzie and her sister Emma Borden reportedly spent time before and after the murders. So that's why the attic's haunted. There's been cold spots and unexplained temperature changes. Many people who have stayed in the Lizzie Borden house report sudden temperature drops or cold spots in certain areas, especially in the rooms where the murders took place. These cold spots are often felt in areas that seem to have no logical explanation for the temperature change. The presence of Lizzie Borden's spirit. While Lizzie was acquitted for the murders, some believe her restless spirit still lingers in the house. Visitors have reported sensing a strong, oppressive energy, particularly in the room where Lizzie's father was murdered. People have also claimed to experience vivid dreams involving Lizzie, or they report being watched by an unseen presence in the home. Guests have reported electrical malfunctions, such as lights flickering or equipment malfunctioning, without any reasonable explanation. Paranormal investigators have captured strange readings on electronic devices, indicating possible supernatural activity. Some claim that items such as furniture, objects, or personal belongings have been moved without explanation. In some cases, objects are said to disappear, only to reappear in places they weren't previously. Psychological impact on visitors. Many people report a sense of unease or discomfort when staying in the house, particularly in the rooms where the murders occurred. This sensation is often described as a feeling of being watched or an oppressive atmosphere that makes it difficult to relax. There are also accounts of people feeling an overwhelming sense of sadness or fear while inside the home, particularly in the areas where the murders took place. Some claim to have experienced vivid dreams or nightmares about the murders. That would freak me out. Like, you already got footsteps.
Yeah, I. You already know the murders have happened there, and then if you're staying at that place, and then you're having nightmares about the very murders that happened, like that's freaky.
I just and I got one last little bit of evidence about some of the hauntings, but I felt like I was just I'm gonna tell you guys, I'm kind of bad at it with Steven. I just start reading and I don't stop reading, and then I'm like, I should let Steven speak instead of just over there chugging his drink. Pepsi.
Yeah, I know. I'm betraying Coke.
This ad is not sponsored by Pepsi.
Yeah,
Yeah,
maybe.
no, I think this place sounds spooky to me, man. Like, already, like, it's one thing to like hear footsteps, because like with footsteps, I feel like you can kind of sit there and you can just be like, okay, old house, it's just creaking. But then like the thing that gets me, it's not like hearing the whispers or stuff like that, because you can try to explain that away.
Right.
But like when your body naturally responds to the feeling of someone watching you, and you just have that feeling that somebody's just looking over your shoulder and is just watching you. And then on top of that, it's not like it's, oh, there's just somebody watching me, but to feel like this is a oppressive person, this is just an angry, evil person. That's what gets me. It's kind of like, oh, like I don't want somebody watching me sleep, knowing that
Right.
they gave their dad 40 whacks.
Yeah, no, it's just well, one thing that gets me is that dreams are usually something very personal to you. Like you dream about people you've seen or experiences you've had. Maybe if you watched a horror movie recently, then maybe you're dreaming about that.
Mhm.
But if you are staying at the Lizzie Borden house and you are dreaming about axe murders that you didn't witness happen, maybe you heard about it, but you didn't witness happen, and you're having dreams about that, it almost feels like something is inserting those dreams into your head.
I know.
Like it's not your mind making up that dream. It's like somebody or something is putting that dream into your mind. And that freaks me out. That's the part that I'm like, I'm getting
So,
some heebie jeebies from that.
so out of all the evidence that we have heard of, the voices, the whispers, the cold spots, temperature changes, the feeling that Lizzie Borden is there and people having um like even like talking about the dreams, like even looking back, people have also experienced to have vivid dreams involving Lizzie. So it can almost be like, you're having a lovely dream. Steven's dreaming about his wedding with the Bell Witch. And he looks in the crowd and there's Lizzie Borden sitting in the crowd. And it's like, wait a second, where'd you come from? That like the whole dream thing to me, it's like, you know what I mean? Like, it's
See,
like,
that's the part where I'm like, that's kind of freaky.
because it's like, I mean, like everything else, the footsteps, the whispers, seeing something or feeling like you're being watched, you could easily get rid of that by just walking in the other room or leaving the house. But to like have a nightmare about you possibly being the person to chop these people up, and then, or to see Lizzie Borden in your dreams because she's invading your personal space, that's where like it's a little freaky because it's like you can't just wake yourself up, your body has to naturally be woken up or somebody has to wake you up. And that's just where it's like you can't escape that.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's like it's something within you rather than external, and it's yeah. I don't know. That's trippy stuff right there.
That's trippy. So out of all this, paranormal investigators actually have found evidence. They've apparently been investigating this place numerous times by many paranormal teams. Many claim to have captured photographic evidence, audio recordings such as EVPs or electronic voice phenomenons, as they're more known, and even strange readings on paranormal equipment like EMF readers, which scan electromagnetic fields, and infrared thermometers. These investigators continue to fuel speculation about the house's haunted reputation. A lot to unpack there, but as we talked about, the scary thing for us is the whole her being in your dreams. But see, like
Right.
that's the thing that like gets me with these investigations is just like you could sit there and create a ghost story, and it's just a ghost story. But then when you have multiple people seeing the same exact thing, hearing the same exact thing, experiencing exactly the same thing you're experiencing, and then to also have these people actually have proof of it, that's where it's like you got to question it a little bit, like I know, and obviously, Steven and I have our different opinions and views on ghosts. um I think, and obviously we got the ghost from the Bible that we eventually will probably talk about on Steven's future podcast of Beyond the Bible. But what do you think? Like, I mean, before we get into our ChatGPT story, I just would like to kind of hear what you think about all this evidence. Like, what do you think could be causing people to hear these voices, to all like to see, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've said my view on ghosts before, but if you guys haven't heard if this is like the first episode of the show you're watching, my basic belief is that you have angels and you have demons, and ghosts aren't necessarily people who died and are left behind on this planet. Ghosts are really demons that maybe could pretend to be people at sometimes, but they're really demons. I don't think ghosts are people that have passed on. And so with this Lizzie Borden house thing, yeah, I mean, if it was Lizzie Borden that did it, and again, we'll talk about that on whether it was her or somebody else in a future episode. But like, if it was her or whoever it was, yeah, doing an axe murder is like a demonic thing to do. That's not something that normal people do. Like you don't pick up an axe and decide to whack somebody dozens of times with it. And so whoever did it, yeah, I mean I wouldn't be surprised if there was some demonic influence in that murder even happening.
Mhm.
And then after the murder happening, if those demons wanted to stick around and to continue to operate and be in that place,
Yeah,
and yeah, so that's kind of my general theory.
yeah. I think, and one thing in this list, and Steven and I probably will every ghost episode probably will rehash what we believe. My thought, I do go with Steven to where there's angels, there's demons, like you go to heaven, you go to hell, there's no in between. Sorry, Catholics, you're wrong. There is no purgatory. Um, but I do believe that we were made of energy, and what my thought is, I'm not going to be the kind of guy that, like, even though biblically speaking, ghosts are not real, I'm not going to try to throw out the possibility. Not trying to say that you get left behind on Earth, you know. But what I'm trying to say is, I'm not going to throw out the possibility that there is a plausible explanation for the reason why we possibly hear these voices, possibly these footsteps, maybe see an apparition or two, or feel like we're being watched. Because one thing that kind of stuck out to me when we were talking about this is the line where in my notes where I wrote down um, about the whispers, to where these voices are sometimes described as faint, as though they are coming from a different time period. That kind of stuck with me a little bit in my research, because my like we said, my thought is I think we're made of energy, and I think when we die, our soul goes to heaven or it goes to hell. There's no in between. But as we know with like Einstein, energy cannot be destroyed. It just kind of lingers. So my thought is, with something like a murder, an axe murder, I'm thinking, you're going to leave behind a footprint. Those moments might be a stain in history and a stain in the timeline, to where they just kind of bleed through in different moments, to where what you hear as footsteps, you might be thinking, oh, Andrew's here, he's walking around. But in reality, it's just an echo of the past. Um,
Mm-hmm.
that's just kind of what I think. And that whole
Interesting theory to me. But yeah,
yeah, I mean, because that's like with the whole, like I said, like with the whispers. Now, I will say this: I do agree with Steven about the whole demonic thing, because most of the time someone's not going to do something and do it because they just want to do it. Most of the time, there could be some demonic influence. And I've always kind of had this belief that, if there's something like going back to the whole energy thing, I feel like dark energy opens up portals to who knows what. I think with whether Lizzie Borden did it or not, we're not going to talk about that. Let's just say Lizzie did it for the sake of the podcast. Lizzie murders her mom, or her stepmom, and her dad. I think that opens up a womb to where these demonic forces can come in. And like Steven said, the demonic forces could be impersonating Lizzie. And that's the reason why you have this feeling of being watched, it being evil, and even going into the whole dream thing. Like, I think demons can influence that a little bit, to where you haven't envisioned the murder, you know. So that's my thought. I think, in all honesty, I just think it's, like I said, a bleed through history, and maybe there are some demonic forces at play. So, but of course, we cannot have this episode without a good old ChatGPT story.
Chad GPT.
All right. So we talked about our thoughts on
Yep.
whether or not we think the Lizzie Borden house is haunted. We talked about what has gone down in this place. And now it is time for Stephen and I to enter the Lizzie Borden house. This
Have
is
adventure. I'm wearing my Adventure Time shirt, so let's do it.
this is Beyond the Campfire, the Lizzie Borden house investigation. The small clapboard house at 230 2nd Street in Fall River, Massachusetts, stood eerily quiet under the moonlight. Its dark windows seemed to watch Will and Stephen as they unloaded their equipment from their van. I'll say it again, Will muttered, tipping his cowboy hat back. I don't know why we're investigating a murder house. I signed up for monsters, not ghost stories. Stephen adjusted his backpack, packed with cameras and audio recorders. This is one of the most infamous haunted locations in America, Will. The site of one of the most brutal, unsolved murders in history. Yeah, Will said, slinging a flashlight onto his belt. Lizzie Borden took an axe, gave her mother 40 whacks, and so on. But ghost ain't my thing. You can't punch a ghost. You can't punch a Yeti either, Stephen shot back. Sure could, Will grinned. Ask that one in Tibet. Stephen sighed, leading the way up the narrow path to the front door. The house had been converted into a bed and breakfast, its period furnishings meticulously maintained to give visitors a taste of life in the 1890s, a life many claimed that still lingered in the form of restless spirits. Stephen knocked on the door, and it creaked open on its own. He glanced at Will, who raised an eyebrow. Great start, Will said dryly. Very inviting. Inside, the house felt frozen in time. The furniture, wallpaper, and decor all whispered of another era. But it wasn't nostalgia that clung to the air. It was tension. Stephen set up his digital recorder on the parlor table, its red light blinking. This is where the first body was found, he murmured. Andrew Borden, Lizzie's father, he was axed to death while napping on the couch. Yeah, I read the brochure, Will interrupted, peering around the room with his flashlight. Stephen shook his head. Could you take this seriously for once? I am taking it serious, Will said, crouching to examine the couch. Serious enough to wonder how a guy gets whacked with an axe and doesn't wake up screaming. Maybe he didn't have time, Stephen said, his tone grim. He pulled out an EMF detector. It's like its lights flickering as he waved it through the room. Will leaned back against the wall, arms crossed. So what's the plan? We just sit here and wait for something spooky to happen? Pretty much, Stephen said. These things take patience. Hours passed. The old grandfather clock in the corner ticked steadily, the sound magnified by the house's silence. Will had taken a Will had taken to tossing a small rubber ball into the air, catching it absent-mindedly as he lounged on a chair. Stephen was meticulously reviewing their audio recordings when the ball suddenly bounced off his shoulder and rolled across the floor. Hey, Stephen protested, looking up. Watch it. That wasn't me, Will said, his tone uncharacteristically serious. The ball rolled to a stop in the middle of the room. Before either of them could react, it began to roll back towards Will against the slight incline of the floor. Stephen grabbed his camera, fumbling to hit record. Did you see that? Will stood, his hand hovering near his flashlight. I saw it. Question is, who or what moved it? A loud thud echoed from upstairs, followed by the sound of heavy footsteps pacing across the floorboards. Stephen's eyes widened. That's coming from Lizzie's room. Of course it is, Will muttered. The two exchanged a glance before heading for the staircase, Stephen gripping his camera tightly and Will clutching a flashlight like a club. Lizzie's room was cold, far colder than the rest of the house. The air smelled faintly of dust and something metallic, like old blood. Stephen set up another recorder on the dresser. Lizzie Borden, he said softly, his voice steady despite the unease in his eyes. If you're here, we just want to talk. Can you give us a sign? The room was silent. Will glanced around, his expression skeptical. Looks like she ain't home. Then the door slammed shut behind them. Both men jumped. Stephen's camera swung toward the door, but there was nothing there. Okay, Will said, his voice tight. That's a sign. Before Stephen could respond, the sound of whispers filled the room. Soft, unintelligible, but unmistakable. Stephen turned toward the bed, his camera shaking slightly in his hands. Do you hear that? Yeah, Will said, stepping close to the dresser. But I don't see anything. The mirror above the dresser suddenly fogged over as though someone had breathed on it. Then slowly words appeared in the condensation. Leave now. Stephen's breath hitched. Will? Will backed away from the mirror, his jaw clenched. All right, Lizzie. Message received. The temperature in the room dropped even further, their breath now visible in the air. The whispers grew louder and angrier. Time to go, Stephen said, grabbing his equipment in a rush. Already ahead of you, Will replied, dinking open the door. Outside, the two stood on the front lawn, their breath coming in heavy puffs as they stared back at the house. The whispers had stopped, but the unease lingered. Stephen checked his camera, his hands still trembling. We got it, he said, his voice a mix of relief and disbelief. The ball, the door, the mirror, it's all on tape. Will shook his head, adjusting his hat. You can keep your ghost, Stephen. I'll take a good old flesh and blood monster any day. Stephen gave a weak laugh. But you have to admit, this was worth it. Evidence like this is why we do what we do. Will sighed, glancing back at the darkened windows of the house. Yeah? Well, next time, let's pick something that don't write creepy messages on mirrors. As they climbed into the van and drove off in the night, the house stood silently behind them. But in one of the upstairs windows, a faint shadow moved. A reminder that, in the Lizzie Borden house, the past is never truly at rest.
Wow. Alrighty.
These ChatGPT stories are getting better and better, man.
Yeah. I think just slowly learning about you and me and also feeding off of the stories before. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's just improving. They're getting better, and I love it.
Yeah. I'm really excited to see, because obviously we won't reveal our episodes, but I'm really excited, guys, for our Valentine's Day episode, because that's going to be a really fun chat GBT story for Steven. So yeah.
Oh man, am I getting seduced by something,
Possibly.
or am I doing this? No, I'm just kidding.
All right, Steve.
Oh man, jokes.
All
Alrighty.
right, man.
Cool. Is there anything else we needed to discuss, or
No, but yeah, that, guys, is the Lizzie Borden house. I hope you
Lizzie?
guys got spooked. Hopefully you're not too shaken with fear, and sleep well tonight. Don't have any nightmares about axe murders, 40 wax, 41 wax. Chop,
Or
chop,
go stay at
chop.
the Borden house. Yeah, leave that to us maybe.
Yeah.
So,
We'll have Steven sleep in the guest room or in Lizzie's room. Let him have the dreams.
what's the most haunted room though? Oh,
The
that's
attic.
right. Nobody stays there, right?
No. I mean, I think there's 2 bedrooms up there or something, but we
Well,
can just lock him in the attic if you want.
the people that operate the house, like they don't let people sleep.
They probably do.
Oh, they
It's got
do.
2 bedrooms up there. I don't know, but I'm pretty sure if like we're doing this podcasting thing, I think we're gonna have to ask special permission to like have the whole house to ourselves for a night. So we'll make sure that we specifically lock Steven in the attic
Oh boy.
at 3 a.m. because that's when everything bad happens. That's when the witching hour is.
I was about to say, yeah, like that's the devil's hour, right? Like it's
Yeah.
like a Trinity thing or something like that.
Yeah, because it's to mock the Trinity, because Jesus died at 3. Actually, I think it's 3:33 is when Jesus died on the cross. 3:33 p.m. So the opposite of that would be 3:33 a.m.
AM, yeah. So
And yeah, demons knocking 3. It's to mock the Trinity, and so. All right, so Steven's going to sleep in Lizzie's room, and he's going to finally dream of women. That's a way to put it, man.
that is indeed. So
yeah, make sure you guys follow us on our Instagram and our Twitter at Beyond Campfire. Find us on TikTok at Beyond the Campfire. Find us on YouTube at Beyond the Campfire Podcast and Beyond the Campfire, wherever you get a podcast. Thank you guys for watching. And like I said, sleep well. Chop, chop, chop.